Garrett Boone was down to his last $20 when he promised his daughter they'd go to the park that afternoon, a promise he couldn't break, not after everything she'd already lost. "Daddy, can I bring Sir Waffles?" Daisy asked, clutching her worn-out stuffed bunny like it was made of gold. Garrett nodded, adjusting the strap of her faded pink backpack over his shoulder. "Of course. Sir Waffles goes where you go." The park wasn't anything fancy, just a quiet green space behind the library with a rusted swing set and a sandbox that had seen better days. But to Daisy, it was paradise. And to Garrett, it was the only place he could take her without spending money. He'd lost his job 2 months ago. The layoffs came fast, and the severance didn't last. His ex had walked out 3 years earlier and hadn't looked back, leaving him with full custody and a daughter who believed in magic and pancakes for dinner. Today, he just needed a moment to breathe. Somewhere Daisy could run and laugh, and he could pretend for just a little while that their life wasn't unraveling. "Push me higher, Daddy," Daisy squealed from the swing. Garrett smiled and stepped behind her. "You got it, Rocket Girl." He gave her a push, her laughter ringing out like bells. That's when he noticed her. She was sitting on a nearby bench, a coffee cup in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose. Her black heels didn't belong anywhere near wood chips, and her blazer looked like it cost more than his rent. But she wasn't scrolling through her phone or taking business calls. She was watching Daisy with a soft smile. Garrett gave her a polite nod. She returned it, then surprised him by standing and walking over. "She's got a great laugh," the woman said, her voice smooth, but not snobby. "Yeah," Garrett said, brushing a hand through his hair. "She gets it from her mom." The woman paused, then nodded.
"I'm Rachel."
"Rachel Langston." Garrett Boone. He shifted, suddenly aware of how old his sneakers looked. "That's Daisy."
Daisy, Rachel Baba.
Daisy waved back mid-swing. "Daddy says I'm a rocket when I fly." Rachel laughed. "You sure are." There was a beat of silence before Garrett added, "You don't seem like someone who usually hangs out at parks." Rachel's lips tugged into a small smile. "I needed a break. My assistant said I looked like I was about to throw my laptop out the window." Garrett chuckled. "Sounds like a serious emergency." "Life or death," Rachel said lightly. Another silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was simple.
Easy.
Rachel took the seat next to him on the bench, legs crossed neatly, eyes still on Daisy. She's lucky to have a dad who shows up. Garrett didn't answer right away. He stared ahead, his fingers tightening slightly around the backpack strap. "I don't always get it right. But I try." That's more than most. A gust of wind blew a few strands of hair across Rachel's face. She didn't fix it. Garrett noticed. They sat like that for a while, watching Daisy, talking about nothing. Rachel asked about Daisy's favorite color, purple, her favorite animal, penguins, and the worst tantrum she'd ever thrown, the great cereal spill of last spring. Garrett asked what Rachel did, and she paused before saying, "Corporate stuff. Boring mostly." He didn't push. He didn't care about titles. She didn't offer one. Eventually, Daisy ran over, cheeks flushed, bunny in hand. "Can we get ice cream, Daddy?" Garrett hesitated. Ice cream meant spending money. He had enough for 1 cone, maybe 2 if he skipped lunch. Rachel stood, brushing off her skirt. "Let me get it." Garrett raised a brow. "You don't have to." "I know," she said simply. "But I want to." Daisy looked up at him, wide-eyed. "Can we? Please." He looked between her and Rachel. Something in her gaze wasn't pity. It was kindness. Genuine. "All right," he said. "But only if you let us pay you back." Rachel smiled. "We'll negotiate." They walked to the small cart on the corner. Rachel paid without blinking, ordering mint chocolate chip for Daisy and vanilla for herself. Garrett declined, but she bought him one anyway. "Consider it a thank you," she said, handing him the cone, "for letting me crash your afternoon." They sat on the grass. Daisy told Rachel all about Sir Waffle's secret spaceship and how one day he was going to take her to the moon. Rachel listened like Daisy was telling her the secrets of the universe. Garrett hadn't seen anyone look at his daughter like that in a long time. Maybe ever. When the sun started dipping low, he packed Daisy's things and stood. "Thanks again. For the ice cream." Rachel nodded. "Anytime." He hesitated. "You come here often?" She smiled, a little amused. "I might start." Garrett grinned. "Then maybe we'll see you around." Rachel watched them walk away, something warm settling in her chest. She was supposed to be in a boardroom today, arguing over merger terms. But instead, she'd spent the afternoon talking to a man who didn't know she ran a billion-dollar company, and for once, she didn't care. She looked down at her phone, 30 missed messages blinking back. She didn't open a single one. The next day, Garrett sat on the same bench. Daisy ran ahead to the swings. Rachel was already there, coffee in hand. "You're early," she said. He smiled. "So are you." They kept coming back. Day after day. Sometimes they'd talk for 5 minutes, sometimes for an hour. Daisy adored her. Garrett was starting to too. One afternoon, Daisy tugged on Rachel's sleeve and whispered, "You should be my daddy's girlfriend." Garrett nearly choked on his soda. Rachel just laughed. But that night, Garrett lay awake thinking about her laugh, her eyes, the way she made Daisy feel seen, the way she made him feel like he wasn't failing. He didn't know who she really was, and she didn't know how broke he really was. But somehow, they were starting to feel like something real, something he hadn't believed he'd ever have again. And Rachel's CEO, powerhouse, and painfully alone was falling fast for the struggling dad with the kind eyes and the daughter who believed in rocket ships. Neither of them saw it coming, but it was happening. It wasn't until the 6th afternoon that Garrett noticed Rachel had stopped wearing her blazer. Not that he'd been paying attention to what she wore.
Much.
But there was something about the soft oatmeal-colored sweater she had on today that made her seem
different.
Less polished. Less guarded. More like the woman who crouched in the sandbox with Daisy and helped her build a crooked castle with a moat made of twigs. "Your turret's leaning," Garrett said, crouching beside them. "It's not leaning," Rachel replied, placing a pebble on top like a crown. "It's expressing creative freedom." Daisy giggled as she pressed her thumb into the sand. "Miss Rachel says it's a princess tower. But the princess doesn't want to get married." Rachel raised an eyebrow at Garrett. "She says she wants to be an astronaut queen." "I support that." Garrett shook his head. "You're going to be the reason I have to explain quantum physics before 2nd grade." "You'll manage." He watched her dig another trench in the sand, sleeves pushed up, fingers dusted with dirt. "You're not really corporate, are you?" Rachel glanced up, amused. "Why do you say that?" "Because you just spent 20 minutes arguing with a 6-year-old about whether dragons could live in volcanoes." "Listen," Daisy made an excellent point. "Lava immunity would be essential." Garrett sat back on his heels. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." She didn't say anything at first. Just brushed some sand from her palm, then looked at him, eyes thoughtful. "I used to think I had to be a certain way. Efficient.
Precise.
Detached. I spent years building something that mattered and forgot how to enjoy it." Garrett studied her face, realizing this was the first time she'd said anything personal. "What did you build?" Rachel hesitated, then shrugged. "Something big." That night, after Daisy had fallen asleep curled beside Sir Waffles, Garrett sat on the edge of the couch, staring at his cracked phone screen. He had 2 missed calls from a staffing agency and 1 email from his landlord with a subject line, "Final Notice." He didn't open it. Not yet. Instead, he thought about Rachel's laugh when Daisy put a leaf on her head and declared her Queen of Autumn. He thought about the way she'd looked at him when he told her he used to draw comic books in high school. Like she actually cared. He'd never met a woman like her. And he didn't understand why she kept coming back. The next afternoon, rain threatened to cancel their routine. Garrett debated staying home, but Daisy insisted they bring umbrellas and wear their puddle boots. He didn't have any, but he wrapped his shoes in plastic bags and called it a compromise. When they arrived, Rachel was already under the covered gazebo with a paper bag in her lap. "You brought snacks?" Garrett asked as Daisy ran ahead to splash in a puddle. "I brought sandwiches," Rachel said. "I figured we'd get hungry." Garrett blinked. "You packed lunch." "Well, I ordered it. But I put it in a bag. That counts, right?" He sat beside her, eyebrows raised. "You're full of surprises. You have no idea." They ate while Daisy collected magic leaves and tried to convince a pigeon to be her sidekick. Rachel handed Garrett a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. "Turkey and cheddar."
No más cerdo.
He looked at her. "How did you know?" "You mentioned it once. When we passed that deli." He stared at the sandwich, something tightening in his chest. People didn't usually pay attention to things like that. Not about him. "Thanks," he said quietly. Rachel nodded, but didn't meet his eyes. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the soft patter of rain. Eventually, Garrett asked, "Why do you come here?" She didn't answer immediately. Then, "Because no one expects anything from me here. No decisions, no deals, no pressure. Just Daisy's stories. And your bad jokes. They're excellent jokes." Rachel laughed under her breath. "They're terrible, but they make me forget I'm supposed to be someone else." That pulled his attention. "Who are you supposed to be?" She looked out at the park, eyes distant. "The woman who never lets things slip. The one who always says the right thing, wears the right outfit, makes the right move. The version of me that I created to survive." Garrett didn't interrupt, just listened. "I've spent years trying to prove I belong in rooms where no one wanted me. And now that I've built something too big to ignore, I don't know what to do with the silence when I'm alone. You don't have to be that version here." Rachel turned to him, something raw in her expression. "That's why I keep coming back.
You don't know who I am.
And you treat me like
Me."
Garrett swallowed hard. "I like who you are." Rachel's gaze held his for a beat too long. Then Daisy shouted from across the grass, "I found a frog." They both turned. "She's fearless," Rachel said. "She gets that from her mother." Rachel looked at him, quietly. "You never talk about her." Garrett exhaled. "There's not much to say. She left. Said family wasn't what she wanted after all. I don't think she ever really saw Daisy. Not the way you do." Rachel's face softened. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. I got the best part of the deal." They watched Daisy try to build a puddle fort around the frog. "She deserves more," Garrett added. "And I don't know if I can give it to her." Rachel's voice was steady. "You already do." A week later, Garrett got a call from a temp agency offering him a last-minute warehouse shift. It was overnight, and the pay was barely enough to breathe, but he took it. Rachel noticed the dark circles under his eyes the next time they met. "You working nights?" He hesitated.
"Yeah."
"Just until something steadier comes along." She didn't push, didn't offer money, just handed him a thermos of coffee and told Daisy she'd brought special rocket fuel. Later, while Daisy was busy building a mission control station out of sticks, Rachel turned to him. "I want to show you something." Garrett blinked.
"Now."
"Tomorrow. I'll pick you up." He hesitated. "I don't have a sitter. I'll arrange one. Someone I trust." He opened his mouth to argue, but she added, "Just trust me." The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of Garrett's apartment building. A woman stepped out tall, composed, mid-50s, wearing a navy cardigan and holding a clipboard. "I'm Helen," she said. "Rachel sent me." "Are you a nanny?" "I'm a retired teacher. I help with her foundation's outreach programs." Garrett blinked. "She has a foundation?" Helen smiled. "You'll learn more today."
Don't worry about a thing.
Daisy and I are going to build a whole city out of cereal boxes. Garrett wasn't sure what shocked him more, that Rachel had a foundation, or that he just climbed into a car with tinted windows and leather seats that probably cost more than his childhood home. He found Rachel already inside, wearing a deep navy coat and a look he hadn't seen before, focused, businesslike, but still. Her. "Where are we going?" he asked. She glanced at him. "To see the real me." They drove past the edge of the city, into a part of town Garrett had only seen in magazines: high rises with mirrored windows, ballet stations, manicured rooftop gardens. They pulled into a private parking garage beneath a sleek glass building. Inside the elevator, she pressed the top button. "Rachel, what is this?" She didn't answer, just waited. When the doors opened, Garrett stepped out into a space that didn't seem real. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the skyline. A long marble table sat beneath a chandelier that looked like frozen stars. Assistants moved through the room with headsets and tablets, nodding as she passed. Rachel led him through glass doors into an expansive office. Her name, Rachel Langston, was engraved in silver on the wall behind her desk. Garrett stared. She closed the door. "I'm the CEO of Langston Dynamics. We build infrastructure solutions, clean energy, smart housing, urban development. I started it after a merger deal went south, and I realized I was tired of building other men's empires." He turned to her, stunned. "You're a billionaire." She nodded. "Yes. And you've been coming to the park every day, eating sandwiches on the grass, helping my daughter build castles out of dirt." "I've never liked boardrooms, but I love seeing the world through her eyes. Through yours." Garrett sat down, heart thudding. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I didn't want you to see my title before you saw me." He ran a hand through his hair. "I don't know what to say." Rachel closed the distance between them, voice quiet. "Say, you let me keep showing up. Even now." He looked at her. Really looked at her. The woman who'd learned Daisy's favorite animal, who listened when no one else did, who remembered how he liked his sandwich. The woman who'd built an empire and still knelt in the dirt to build towers with a little girl who believed in magic. He reached for her hand. "I will." Garrett hadn't said a word the entire ride back. Rachel didn't push him. She just sat beside him in the SUV, eyes forward, hands folded tightly in her lap, trying to ignore the way her pulse thudded at her neck. The reveal had gone exactly as planned, and yet nothing about it felt predictable. Garrett had listened. Really listened. He hadn't recoiled or shut down. But he'd gone quiet in a way that made her heart twist. When they reached his building, he turned to her, finally. "I need to pick up Daisy." Rachel nodded. "Helen's still with her. She called an hour ago. Said they were painting a cereal box zoo." Garrett gave a small, distracted laugh. "Of course they are." She hesitated. "Can I come?" He looked at her for a long beat, then nodded once. Daisy was still in pajamas, barefoot, and covered in streaks of red paint when they walked in. Helen was on the floor beside her, holding up a glitter-covered giraffe. As soon as Daisy saw Rachel, she squealed and ran straight into her arms. "You're back. I made you a penguin. He has a crown 'cause he's the king." Rachel knelt and hugged her tightly, emotion clogging her throat. "I love him already," she whispered. Garrett watched them, something unreadable in his expression. When Helen left, Garrett turned to Rachel. "Why did you show me all that?" She set the glitter giraffe on the table. "Because you deserve the truth. You could have kept pretending. I didn't want to. Not with you." He studied her carefully. "Is that the life you want?" She blinked. "What do you mean?" "The glass tower. The boardrooms. The meetings. Is that what makes you happy?" Rachel hesitated. "It's what I built. It gave me power when I didn't have any. It let me make decisions no man could take from me." "But does it make you happy?" She sat down slowly, her voice quieter. "It used to feel like enough. Now I don't know. Daisy plopped down beside them, hugging her bunny close. Daddy says we don't know what we want until we find it. Rachel looked at Garrett. His jaw was tight, eyes guarded.
He didn't speak again that night.
The next morning, Rachel stood in her kitchen, staring at her untouched espresso. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Her assistant had sent the morning schedule twice. The CFO was asking about quarterly projections. A director from the international division wanted to reschedule next week's summit. She turned the phone over and walked out. By noon, she was standing outside Garrett's building. He opened the door, surprised. I thought you had meetings. I canceled them. He stepped back to let her in. Daisy was on the couch, drawing what looked like a flying toaster. Rachel sat beside her. What are we making today? It's a toaster spaceship. It makes breakfast in space. Rachel smiled faintly. Brilliant. Garrett leaned against the counter. You really canceled your whole day? Yes. He crossed his arms. Why? Because I couldn't stop thinking about what you asked me. He raised an eyebrow. You asked if it made me happy, she answered. The truth is, I don't remember the last time it did. Garrett walked over slowly. What do you need from me, Rachel? She looked up at him, her voice steady. Nothing. I just wanted to be here. He swallowed hard. I don't know what you see in this. In me. Rachel glanced at Daisy. I see something real. Something I've never had. Garrett sat down, shoulders tense. You could have anyone. Someone with a driver and a penthouse. Someone who doesn't have unpaid bills and holes in his shoes. She reached for his hand. I don't care about any of that. He pulled back slightly. You say that now. I say that because it's true. Daisy looked up. Are you arguing? Rachel smiled.
No, sweetheart.
We're just talking.
Oh, good.
Because Daddy gets really quiet when he's sad. Garrett closed his eyes. Rachel gently reached for his hand again, and this time, he didn't pull away. 2 days later, Rachel invited them both to an event her foundation was hosting. It was a community fair for underserved families, bounce houses, food trucks, local artists, face painting. She'd never attended herself, but this time, she showed up not as a CEO, but as Daisy's honorary guest. Daisy wore a sparkly cape and insisted Rachel have a unicorn painted on her cheek. Garrett laughed until the painter turned on him and Daisy demanded he get a space alien. Rachel walked through the booths with her hand loosely in his, the city skyline behind them, volunteers waving at her with familiarity. She stopped to introduce Garrett and Daisy to every staff member who approached. When one of them asked who they were, Rachel didn't flinch. They're family, she said plainly. Garrett's head snapped toward her, but she kept walking, like she hadn't just flipped his world upside down. Later that evening, while Daisy was curled up in the back seat with a balloon animal and a melting snow cone, Garrett looked over at her. Family? Rachel didn't look away from the road. That's how it feels to me. He was quiet for a long time. Then, you know you're not obligated to rescue us, right? She let out a breath, keeping her voice even. I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm just trying to choose you. Back at his apartment, Daisy was half asleep when Garrett carried her upstairs. Rachel waited in the hallway, her coat wrapped around her shoulders. When he returned, she was staring at the chipped paint on the stairwell wall. I know this isn't your world, Garrett said. She looked up. It's not about the world. It's about the people in it. He stepped closer. I'm scared, Rachel. So am I. I don't want to be your secret. You're not. I don't want to fall in love with someone who's going to wake up and realize she deserves better. Rachel reached up, touched his cheek. I already did. I realized I deserve someone who sees me not what I built. Someone who makes grilled cheese at 2 in the morning and reads bedtime stories with voices for every character. Garrett's voice cracked. I've never had anything like this. Neither have I. He leaned in, forehead resting against hers. It's not going to be easy. I'm not looking for easy. The kiss was slow, hesitant at first. But then her hands were in his hair, and his arms wrapped around her waist, and the space between them disappeared. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. I have something else to show you, she said. Garrett raised an eyebrow. Another office tower? She stepped back, eyes gleaming.
No.
Something better. The next morning, she picked them up again, this time taking them out of the city entirely. Daisy pressed her face to the window, gasping as fields and lakes replaced concrete and traffic. They pulled up to a long gravel driveway lined with trees. At the end of it stood a small, charming house with a wraparound porch and a red front door. Garrett stared. What is this? Rachel got out and handed him a set of keys. It's yours. He didn't move. I bought it last year, she said. It was supposed to be a weekend place, but I never came. It didn't feel like a home. Not until I thought of you two in it. Garrett shook his head. Rachel, I can't. I'm not giving it to you. I'm offering it. You can rent it if you want. Or, we can figure something else out. I just wanted you to have a place where Daisy could run and play and sleep without sirens outside the window. He looked at her, overwhelmed. She loves you, he said hoarsely. I think I do too. Rachel stepped closer. Then let's build something. Not a company. Not a charity. Just a life. He took her face in his hands, kissed her again, then walked up the porch steps and opened the door. Inside, the walls were bare, the furniture minimal. But Daisy ran through it laughing, declaring it a castle. And for the first time in years, Garrett felt like he wasn't trapped in survival. He was stepping into something new. Not a rescue. Not a fantasy. Just love. Real and terrifying. And finally, possible. Garrett stood in the doorway of the house, the keys still gripped in his hand, as Daisy danced barefoot through the empty living room, her laughter echoing off the bare walls. Rachel leaned against the porch railing behind him, silent, waiting. The house smelled like cedar and new beginnings. I feel like I'm in someone else's life, Garrett said without turning around. Rachel stepped beside him.
No.
You're just finally in yours. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. I don't know how to do this. You don't have to know. You just have to want it. Daisy came running back, gripping a tarnished doorknob she'd found in one of the upstairs rooms. This place has secrets, she declared. I can feel it. Rachel crouched beside her. Let's find them. Garrett watched them for a long moment before stepping fully inside. The door shut behind him with a soft click. The next week was a blur of moving boxes, mismatched furniture, and 1,000 decisions that somehow felt less terrifying with Rachel in the room. She didn't try to take over. She didn't suggest where the couch should go, or what color the kitchen curtains ought to be. She just asked questions, listened, and made space. The night they brought Daisy's bed over, Garrett found Rachel kneeling beside it, adjusting the covers so the edges were tucked under with the same care she gave everything else. It was the first time he'd seen her nervous. I've never done this before, she said. He crouched beside her. Tucked a kid in?
No.
Belonged somewhere. He watched her brush a strand of hair from Daisy's face, her hand lingering. You do now, he said. Rachel didn't leave that night. Or the next. 2 weeks later, Garrett walked into the kitchen to find her barefoot in jeans, humming under her breath as she poured pancake batter onto the griddle. Daisy sat at the table, drawing a rocket made entirely of eggs. You're up early, Rachel said without turning. Garrett leaned against the counter, watching her. You cook? I'm learning. The woman who once called me to ask how to use a toaster oven is now making pancakes from scratch? Don't get cocky. These are from a box. He smiled, crossing the room. Still counts. She handed him a plate. You're still getting the lumpy one. I'll treasure it forever. That afternoon, while Daisy was at a nearby art camp Rachel had found through one of her outreach contacts, Garrett and Rachel sat on the back steps in the shade, sharing a bottle of lemonade. The breeze carried the scent of wildflowers and something else, something uncertain and hopeful. Rachel rested her head on his shoulder. I got an offer yesterday. He stiffened slightly. For what? A buyout. A big one. Enough to retire 3 times. He didn't respond. I'm not taking it, she added. He turned to her. Why not? Because it's not the future I want anymore. Garrett stared out at the trees. I don't want to be the reason you give everything up. She reached for his hand. You're not. You're the reason I finally see clearly. Later that evening, Rachel stood in front of a mirror in their new bedroom, adjusting a simple silver bracelet. Garrett stepped in behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. You look nervous, he said. She met his eyes in the mirror. I'm meeting your sister for dinner. I'd be insane not to be. She's a therapist. She's paid to intimidate. Rachel turned in his arms. What if she thinks I'm too much? She won't. Because she'll see what I see. Rachel paused. Which is? A woman who makes pancakes and billion-dollar decisions with the same level of determination. They met his sister at a small Italian place near the edge of town. Rachel wore a soft navy blouse, understated jewelry, and the same quiet confidence she always carried like armor. But Garrett saw the flicker of nerves in her posture. His sister, Andrea, was direct but kind. She asked questions, real ones. And Rachel didn't flinch. She talked about how she'd started her company, how she'd made mistakes, and how she wasn't sure what the next chapter looked like, but she was ready to write it anyway. When they left the restaurant, Andrea hugged Garrett tightly, then turned to Rachel. Take care of him, she said simply. Rachel nodded. I already do. 3 days later, Rachel opened her email to find the final terms of the buyout sitting in her inbox. She stared at them for a long time, then hit delete without opening the attachment. Garrett walked in, drying his hands on a dish towel. You okay? She nodded. I just turned down $1 billion. He blinked. Just now? Yes. He shook his head with a low laugh. You didn't even read it? Nope. Are you insane? Probably. He pulled her close. Would now be a bad time to tell you I only have $17 in my checking account. Perfect timing. They kissed, warm and slow, the kind of kiss that didn't need to prove anything. The next weekend, Rachel stood in the backyard with Garrett and Daisy, watching as a few friends helped assemble the swing set she'd ordered. Garrett had protested lightly, but eventually caved when Daisy wrapped her arms around his waist and whispered, Please. When the last bolt was tightened, Daisy ran straight for the slide, her laughter splitting the air. Rachel watched her, her eyes shining. I still can't believe this is real. Garrett stepped beside her. It is. She turned to him. I want to do something. What? I want to start something new. Not a company.
Not a brand.
Something smaller. Something that matters. He tilted his head. I want to build transitional housing for single parents. Real support. Not just vouchers and pamphlets. I want to use what I know to actually change lives. Garrett looked at her, stunned. You mean that? I've already started the paperwork, she said. He pulled her into his arms. You're incredible. I'm just finally doing what I was meant to. The following month, Rachel stood on a small stage in front of a modest crowd at the groundbreaking ceremony for the first of her new housing centers. She wore jeans and boots, her hair pulled back, and no makeup except a swipe of lip balm. Garrett stood off to the side, Daisy on his shoulders, both of them beaming. Rachel cleared her throat. I used to think success meant skyscrapers and stock tickers. But real success? It's measured in bedtime stories and second chances. It's measured in love. And it's standing right there. She pointed to Garrett and Daisy. Gasps and applause rippled through the crowd. Rachel stepped down from the stage. Garrett met her halfway. You just made me cry in public, he said.
She grinned.
You'll survive. He pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Marry me. Her breath caught. What? Marry me, he repeated, voice low but steady. Not someday. Not eventually.
Now.
She blinked, stunned. Did you just propose to me at a ribbon-cutting ceremony? With a ring pop in my pocket, yes. She laughed, tears slipping down her cheeks. You didn't even ask Daisy. He turned to her.
Daisy.
Can I marry your dad? Daisy clapped. Only if I get to wear a cape at the wedding. Rachel looked back at him, heart full. Yes. The wedding was held 3 weeks later in the backyard. Andrea officiated. Helen brought homemade pies. Daisy wore a cape made of silver tulle and declared herself the flower astronaut. Garrett wore a navy suit and couldn't stop smiling. Rachel walked barefoot across the grass, her dress simple and perfect, her eyes locked on as like the world had finally stopped spinning. When they said their vows, it wasn't about promises of perfection. It was about choosing each other every single day. After the kiss, Daisy ran between them, yelling, Now we're a rocket family. And in that moment, Garrett knew, he hadn't just fallen in love. He'd landed somewhere he never thought he'd belong. Home. Late spring brought a softness to the air, the kind that carried the scent of honeysuckle and fresh-cut grass. Rachel stepped barefoot across the wooden floor of their kitchen, her hand resting lightly on the curve of her stomach. The baby was still, for now, but she could feel the weight of him or her settling deeper each day. Garrett was in the yard with Daisy, helping her set up a lemonade stand that she insisted would fund her future rocket lab. Rachel watched through the window as he crouched beside their daughter, pointing to a hand-drawn sign she'd taped to a crooked stick. Daisy was explaining something with wide gestures and that unfiltered confidence she carried like a shield. Garrett listened like she was briefing him on a national security operation. Rachel turned from the window and opened the fridge, pulling ingredients for dinner. The kitchen was brighter now, filled with mismatched mugs, crayon drawings on the fridge, and a calendar with smeared watercolor stars marking Baby Day, a date that shifted slightly every week. The door creaked open behind her. You've got a customer, Garrett said, stepping in and brushing grass from his shirt. She insists you need to try the secret recipe. Rachel raised an eyebrow. Is it still lemon juice and glitter? Now, with a hint of rogue jelly bean, she wiped her hands and followed him outside, shielding her eyes from the sun. Daisy stood proudly behind her folding table, wearing sunglasses and a cape made from an old beach towel. 2 neighborhood kids were sipping from plastic cups, already loyal patrons. Rachel accepted her cup and took a careful sip.
Wow.
This has
Depth.
Daisy beamed. It's the jelly bean. Garrett leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed, watching her. You're glowing. It's the glitter. No, it's not. She caught the shift in his expression, a quiet awe, something gentle and steady that hadn't faded since the day they said their vows. That night, after Daisy had fallen asleep curled around Sir Waffles and a new plush astronaut named Commander Pickles, Rachel stepped out onto the porch, wrapping her sweater tighter around her. Garrett joined her with 2 mugs of herbal tea, handing her one before settling beside her on the swing. The stars were sharp tonight, the kind that made the sky feel bigger than it had any right to. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous. I know. He sipped his tea. When I first met you, I didn't think I'd ever be part of something like this. I thought it was just going to be Daisy and me, barely making it. Rachel looked at him. And now I can't imagine a life where you're not part of every corner. A breeze moved through the trees, lifting the edge of her sweater. I used to think I had to be everything all the time, Rachel said softly. The strongest, the smartest, the most prepared. But now I know I just needed to be in the right place, with the right people. He reached for her hand, threading his fingers through hers. We're not perfect, but we're real. She smiled. And that's better. A few days later, Rachel stood in the community center she'd renovated from an old auto garage, watching a group of single parents tour the new housing units. The rooms were small but warm, each decorated with soft colors, sturdy furniture, and a sense of dignity. There were stacked washer-dryers, stocked bookshelves, and a communal garden out back. She walked beside a woman named Mila, who had 2 young sons and had been living in transitional shelters for over a year. "I thought this kind of place didn't exist unless you knew someone," Mila said, eyes wide. Rachel shook her head. "You don't need to know someone. You just need someone to believe you deserve it." "You're not what I expected," Mila added. Rachel laughed. "That's what my husband said too." Later that evening, Rachel returned home to find Garrett and Daisy painting wooden stars at the kitchen table. There was paint in Daisy's hair and on Garrett's cheek. Rachel kissed the spot without comment, then picked up a brush and joined them. They talked about school, the new garden beds, and the possibility of naming the baby after a constellation. "I still like Nebula Boone," Daisy said with complete sincerity. "No child of mine is being named after a cosmic gas cloud," Garrett replied. Rachel laughed. "It's not off the table." That weekend, they hosted a small gathering in the backyard. Helen came, bringing her famous peach cobbler. Andrea showed up late with a tray of lasagna and a date who seemed more nervous than necessary. Volunteers from the foundation mingled with neighbors, and laughter wove through the evening air. As the sun dipped low, Garrett pulled Rachel aside and led her to the edge of the yard where a small wooden bench had been placed beneath a climbing wisteria. He handed her a small box. "This isn't another ring, is it?" she teased. "Because I'm running out of fingers." "Open it." Inside was a delicate gold necklace with a tiny rocket charm next to a small engraved coin. She turned it over. It read, "Home is wherever you are." "I wanted you to have something," he said. "Because no matter what we build or where we go, you were the first place I ever felt found." Her eyes shimmered. "I'm going to cry. I'm counting on it." She pressed her forehead to his. "You're everything I never knew I could have." They kissed as the stars began to blink into the sky. Weeks passed. The baby's due date crept closer. They painted the nursery in soft tones, filled it with books and stuffed animals and hand-sewn blankets that showed up from every corner of Rachel's life: her assistant, her housekeeper from the penthouse days, even a retired board member. The night labor started. Garrett remained calm while Rachel growled at him for breathing too loudly. Daisy stayed with Helen, who arrived in 5 minutes flat with a backpack of snacks and coloring books. At the hospital, Rachel squeezed Garrett's hand so hard she left marks. Hours later, they held a tiny, squalling baby with a head full of dark hair and lungs worthy of a Broadway debut. "It's a girl," the nurse said. Garrett looked down at the little bundle and then at Rachel. "She's perfect." Rachel kissed her daughter's forehead. "She's fierce. Like someone I know." They named her Lyra. When they brought her home, Daisy wore a crown and declared herself captain of Big Sister operations. She took her job seriously, arranging toy inspections and lullaby rehearsals. One evening, months later, Rachel stood in the doorway of Lyra's room, watching Garrett rock her gently, whispering a story about a penguin king and a pancake planet. His voice was soft, full of wonder. Rachel stepped in and rested her head on his shoulder. "She likes your stories. I think she likes the sound of my voice. She's not the only one." They stood there, the 3 of them, wrapped in the kind of silence that only came when everything felt undeniably right. That fall, Rachel's transitional housing program expanded into 2 new cities. She traveled occasionally, but always came home in time for bedtime stories and backyard dinners. Garrett worked part-time at the community center, teaching literacy classes and managing outreach for new families. Their life wasn't loud or flashy anymore. It was full of small, extraordinary moments: Daisy's impromptu concerts in the living room, Lyra's first giggle, Garrett's terrible attempts at baking, Rachel's quiet joy in planting tulips under the window. One night, Rachel walked into the living room to find Garrett asleep on the couch, Lyra curled against his chest, and Daisy curled under his arm with a half-read book on her lap. She didn't take a photo.
She didn't need to.
Because this beautifully imperfect, wildly unexpected life wasn't something she needed to capture. She was already living it. And she would every day forward. Together.